NRC, as we heard at the last DOB meeting, the DOB says, oh, well, the NRC is going to have oversight, and the NRC is going to do this, and the NRC is going to do that. Now, that's off the table, because anyone at the NRC who actually is a commissioner, who actually wants to have any kind of safety oversight, will be fired by the executive, without question.
Yeah.
So we no longer have an agency at all. That we knew that before. This isn't like a news to anyone who's been working on the nuclear issue in the country, that the NRC has never done anything. But now they officially will not be doing anything. So now what we really need to be turning to is our state to be really being the oversight. But as you can see from what was put up prior, we have a governor who's a nuclear cheerleader. So in our region, everyone is agreeing that, and even Governor Hochul saying we're not going to reopen Indian Point, and that's a political decision. It's because it's not an anti-nuclear decision, it's a political decision, because she knows that the majority of voters are downstate here. She knows 450,000 people signed a petition to stop the dumping of tritium into the Hudson River and got the bill passed, which she was forced to sign reluctantly. She waited till the last day, but it's signed, it's law, it's being challenged by the NRC and by Holtec that they can continue dumping into the Hudson River. But they know politically that they don't want to reopen Indian Point. However, Mike Lawler came out and said, with the Secretary of Energy, we're going to reopen Indian Point. So even though our state is saying no, the federal government's going to try to preempt and reopen Indian Point. So that's where our fight is. We have a history here at Indian Point, as you clearly stated, of the physical reasons why Indian Point is not a site to have any kind of nuclear reactor on, operating or closed. But we, not only all the physical reasons, we are probably, Indian Point always was one of the most attractive terrorist targets in the country, maybe in the world. We're right 24 miles from Times Square, and we all who got involved after 9/11 and understand, the deep danger of the terrorist cyber security issues at Indian Point, have to understand what's going on today in the geopolitical climate of the world. I mean, I think that many people here in this region, even though they may be, quote, pro-nuclear or think nuclear is a solution to climate change, are all breathing a sigh of relief that Indian Point's not open during this war, or during any war that we're having, because it's certainly, if a terrorist wants to come after us, this is the site. And going to the issue here is not, we have the Indian Point issue, but we have the statewide issue. We're all New York State residents. So the $33 billion that is being funded to keep the aging, corroding upstate nuclear reactors open, that's in our bills. Our energy bills are going up. They're also talking about another $100 to $120 billion more to build these 5 gigawatts of nuclear. That's gonna go into our bills. That is being done without any kind of feasibility study, cost-benefit analysis. There is no existing official health studies. The only health studies that are being done are epidemiological by Harvard and Radiation and Public Health Project, based on the CDC registries around nuclear reactors, where they can see the impact of cancer rates. They can also see the impact, this second you close a nuclear reactor, infant mortality rates drop significantly. Infant birth weights go up. So those are very dramatic, instant results that we can see. And the government's not doing those studies because they don't want to, because they know that around all nuclear reactors, there's spikes of cancer everywhere. Specifically, at Indian Point, years ago, there was a thyroid cancer study that clearly showed that the closer you got to the reactor, the higher the thyroid cancer rates are. So we worked really hard to get Indian Point closed. We need to close all the other reactors in the state. Every day a reactor operates, it's making more nuclear waste, unmanageable. Where are we putting it? It's a burden on the state. At the end of the day, every gram of nuclear waste that's made in New York State, we're gonna be left with holding the bag. The company who supposedly is doing the decommissioning, the companies that are paying money into a fund to deal with the waste, that's not going to the state. That's going to these private out-of-state companies. And when they decide to go belly up because they no longer want to deal with the waste, who's going to be left holding the bag? Residents of New York State. There's no insurance, as I think all of you probably know, for nuclear reactors at all. There's the Price-Anderson Act, which exempts them from having liability insurance. They're the only industry in the country that does not have liability insurance for a disaster. So who, if there's an accident, has to pay? We do. All of our mortgages, look at your mortgage. It has a disclaimer for nuclear in your insurance. You look at your insurance. You cannot get nuclear rider. You can't add it on. It's not like fire, earthquake, or flood. There's no rider to get for nuclear insurance. So if there's a nuclear accident and they use up the small amount of money that they have in this fund, we're still going to be left paying for it. So there's so many reasons why nuclear is not an option in right now. But so what can we do? That's really, I think it's a scary prospect of like where are we? We have a federal government that's not paying attention. We have a state that's promoting it, who wants more and more and more, which, to be honest, I don't understand why. I don't understand why our leaders in the state are looking at this and not looking at the long-term costs. Forget about the health, forget about the safety, forget about the terrorism. Everyone cares about costs. Why aren't they looking at the costs? It doesn't, I don't understand why they're jumping on this bandwagon. But what Al and others here have been spending a lot of time with Ann Rabe up in Albany, has been pushing for a nuclear moratorium. It got pretty close in this last budget cycle. But now is the time that we really need to push for it. We need a moratorium for at least 2.5, I say 5 years, until there's actually cost-benefit analysis, feasibility study, and until there's actually a health study done. And that's publicly available, so people can see what is the impact of nuclear. And then going to the other big issue, the reason we're spending all this money in New York State is because nuclear has been defined as, it's a fraud on the public, it's been defined incorrectly. They're greenwashing nuclear as being zero emission energy. Nuclear is not zero emission energy. It never has been. The physics of nuclear is that nuclear emits large amounts of thermal pollution, that going to the river, going to the Hudson River, or any other water body that nuclear reactors are sited at. They're thermally polluting those water bodies every single day because they are dumping their heat into the river every single day and into the air. And it has not ever been calculated. And unlike fossil fuels, which burn once and then are cold ash, nuclear, once you start fission, the heat from nuclear continues being generated until all the half-lives are burned out. So you have to multiply heat times time. And it's not in the way we have all been trained to think. We all think of snapshots, but this is continuum. The same thing with the impact on health. Nuclear emissions, the way they do it at the Department of Health, they average it out. They average emissions. So they take today's emissions, tomorrow's emissions, next week's emissions, the whole year of emissions, and they average, and they use that average. But nuclear emissions is cumulative. It doesn't go away. It needs to be added together, not averaged. And so the math has always been wrong on that. They're just not even the calculations, but the actual structure of the math is incorrect, the formula they're using. So right now, what we need to be doing is educating people that nuclear is not a solution to climate change. Nuclear emits radioactive greenhouse gases, tritium. The steam, the white clouds you see above nuclear reactors is radioactive water and heat. It also emits and creates radioactive carbon-14, which is found all around nuclear reactor sites, which is a new form of carbon, radioactive carbon. That's really says radioactive CO2 and radioactive methane, which are greenhouse gases. And so anyone who's telling you that nuclear is zero emissions, it's a lie. And the government is using that false greenwashing as a fraud on the public. And they're taking billions of dollars of zero emissions credit that was designed by our state legislature to be used for true renewables, and they've diverted it to nuclear. And that diversion has now turned around, and then they say, oh, look, we need nuclear, because look, we had these zero emissions credits, and renewables didn't come online fast enough. And the simple answer is, yeah, they get, in 2017, 7.6 billion went to nuclear, 1 billion was allocated for all renewables, geothermal, solar, wind, battery backup storage, efficiencies. Less than half of that has actually been allocated and spent. So yeah, you wonder why it hasn't come online. Imagine if they had given $7.6 billion to nuclear, to renewables. Then that's what they did. We'd already pretty much be on our way to a clean energy future, but we're not, because of the allocation of funds and because of the politics of nuclear. They have more money, because they're getting all our money, they're able to spend all their money on lobbying and on promoting nuclear. So we're in this horrible cycle of we're giving them money to advertise that they're green when they're not. They've convinced a large part of the public, and especially young people, that they're a solution to climate change, which everyone's concerned about, but they're not. And that's the fraud. So that's where we have to start off. We need to start off with educating people and our legislators. And the legislators should be very concerned about that this whole thing in New York State is being done by government fiat, by executive fiat. They're not going through the legislature. They're not allowing legislators to weigh in. And this is a big decision for New York State to be tying our future and all of our money, our capital, to the future of nuclear in this state, rather than really doing an evaluation and letting our legislators make those decisions. The legislature passed the Clean Energy Standard, which has been abused by the nuclear industry and by our administrative executives. And the Public Service Commission, as many of us know, is nothing more than an arm of the governor, and it basically has no expertise in nuclear or water. That's not what they do. What they know how to do is they know how to regulate rates for gas and oil. And they're improperly placed to be the agency in the state to be controlling nuclear. So that's the new news I have to say. The last thing I want to say is at the DOB meeting, which the Public Service Commission runs, this last DOB meeting, I was appalled by the fact that Holtec, who these meetings are supposed to be, they're supposed to be there to present to the public and to the DOB. They didn't even show up. They didn't even have the courtesy to show up. They didn't even send representatives to show up. They called it in. That's not acceptable. As our community, with all this nuclear waste here, we should be given the tiniest little modicum of respect, like at least they should show up. But we've seen this in Rockland County with the desal situation. The PSC said that at that time, Suez, which became Veolia, needed to show up to these water meetings. And they just stopped showing up. And then they withdrew. And I see that is a pattern that we may be heading for here. So we should be cautious and aware.
Thank you, Susan. Hi.